What happens when two successful entrepreneurs get together for a drink? They talk shop, of course. So grab your favorite cocktail and sit alongside Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso, two seasoned business leaders that have driven their own companies to success, as they share from their experience and dive deep into the secret sauce that can turn a company around. The CEO podcast starts now.
Hey, welcome to CEO Podcast. I'm Scott DeLong. I'm here with Vince Moiso and Scott Empringham.
That's it.
Did I get that right?
That's it. Perfect.
All right,
Perfect.
great. So today's episode, first time we've had a guest. So thank you for participating with us. I appreciate that. And we're a little leery on, I was a little leery on that because this was supposed to be a conversation between a couple guys just hanging out. And then we realized that having three guys hanging out, or three people, doesn't have to always be guys, wouldn't be a bad thing, and bring some other experiences into this. So Vince introduced me to you, and not having met you before, I thought we'd have a phone call. And he told me the topic that you'd want to talk about in your story about overcoming adversity and doing all that kind of stuff would be a great topic for us. But as you and I were talking, I was actually on vacation. I was sitting in a hotel room on vacation, and it just hit me. It's like, no, that's not the story. The story is vulnerability, right? One of the things that I didn't learn growing up, and I'm sure you didn't learn growing up, and I know he didn't learn growing up, being in this macho world of guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
That vulnerability wasn't something that we had talked about, and I really wanted to talk about that, and the power of vulnerability. So first I want to define it, and then I'm going to let you guys talk a little bit.
Awesome.
So there's a couple definitions. Brene Brown, who is an expert at this, she wrote a book on it, Daring Greatly, on vulnerability. She defines it as uncertainty and risk, and an emotional risk in particular. Mine is a little bit different. Mine is, my definition of being vulnerable is being yourself and showing yourself. Not just being it, but presenting it and being out there. So I didn't learn that till I hit 50. 50 years old before I learned that was a positive thing. And we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Sure.
But Vince, I want to hear your connection to vulnerability and whether it's a thing for you, whether it's something that matters, whether it's something that you run away from. Where are you on the vulnerability?
Yeah,
scale?
I've ran away from it most of my life. As you alluded to, I think you got vulnerable in that introduction, by the way, Scott, which was a great lead in.
Thanks.
And I mentioned to both of you, since we've got two Scotts here, I'm just going to refer to you both as your last names moving forward. So here we go, DeLong. Thank you. Yeah, I've avoided it. I've just totally avoided it. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family, right? So I'm the youngest of five. I had both my parents devout Catholics. My dad is Italian. His parents came over during World War II and didn't speak a word of English, and so in the Italian families, right, it's all about familia, and really this whole, if you've ever seen The Godfather, this whole concept of omerta, right, which is just silence, right? It's just no.
Isn't there an EO form with omerta?
Yeah, there is. And you know what? You can't.
Right.
So I grew up in this environment. It was like, don't show emotion. You can't cry. Don't really tell anybody what's really going on, right? It's just, keep a smile on your face. Yeah, smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave, right? And you just kind of move on. So I grew up with that. It certainly helped me in my football career because you could equate it to a word that I love is called poise, right? It's just staying calm under pressure. But ultimately what that means is that you can't really show emotion. And so I think, one, I can tell you for more than half my life, my EQ was in the toilet, and I was incredibly stoic, and I adopted stoicism for my business career and everything else because it's all that I knew. So getting vulnerable was this foreign concept. In fact, I like Brene Brown's definition. I relate to it most because, to me, vulnerability means putting yourself out there. And then putting yourself out there means I'm putting myself out there for the scrutiny of the world. And
why would you do that?
Yeah, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why would I need to do that?
Yeah.
Is a better question. Empringham. Empringham. I want to know how vulnerability has shown up, in your life. I just want to say this because I know your story, and you have graced me with your own vulnerability in telling your story, and it really resonated with me. And we're in, for the audience to understand, we are in Entrepreneurs Organization together and have crossed paths many, many times. And I remember being, my memory of you is being at our chapter retreat and watching you get vulnerable. And I thought, wow, I've still got so much to do. I've still got so much to learn because I'm not even at that level of vulnerability. Like I was blown away that you could get up and tell your story the way that you did. And I just thought, wow, I'm still holding back. That was the first thing that came to me was I'm still holding back. Like I feel like I'm vulnerable and I'm not really all that vulnerable. And that was the impact that you had on me. So honestly, I personally was so excited to have you on this podcast with us to have this conversation. And when DeLong said, we're going to talk about vulnerability, I went, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy. So can you share with us where that has shown up in your life?
Sure. But I do want to touch on something you said there is that situation that you're referring to at that retreat. I have to confess, that was a reluctant vulnerability where there was, to set the stage for Scott, there was a speaker there, and he had everybody essentially write a poem.
Yeah.
About a challenging issue in your life. Or
almost a rap.
Yeah, like a rap. And I'd never written a rap before. He's like, just don't think, it doesn't have to rhyme, just let it flow. And he goes, that thought that you just had about something you didn't want to think about or write it down, that's the one you want to think about, or that's the one you want to write down.
That's good.
And literally the thought I had was a really, really bad situation in my life when I was in high school. There was stuff going on with my mom had cancer at the time, and my dad was battling alcoholism. And so it was a very private thing that I was writing down. I wrote it down, and I never thought I would ever share it with anybody. And so I forget what he said, but he said something like, who had a thought, and that first thought scared you a little bit? And I'm like, well, shit, I don't mind raising my hand for that. And I raised my hand, and he goes, you did. He goes, you mind just standing up, and you mind just sharing what that was? I was like, oh fuck, what did I get into?
What?
And so I stood up, and he said, what was the thought? So I shared just like a sentence, and I was like, and he got me by doing it in incremental sort of vulnerability steps, because my sentence was, I was a challenging situation when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He said, great, well, give him a round of applause, and why don't you come on up here, and do you mind sharing it? And then by that time, I'm already standing up, was applauded.
Yeah.
So I can't take credit for exactly, jumping into that and saying, boy, I'm really going to share this. But next thing I knew, I was in the front of the room bawling and reading this, probably one of the most challenging situations in my life.
All right, so you did that, and you're emotional and all that happened in front of these strangers, right?
Pretty much.
People that you don't know.
Yeah.
How many of those people looked down on you?
Nobody. It was Nobody. It was the opposite.
A lot of hugs.
Yeah.
Lot of applause.
Yeah. But the fear was
it's overwhelming.
They would be looking down on you.
Not only did I find myself, all of a sudden questioning that my inability to actually get vulnerable or to really go deep, go beyond the 5%, right? I mean, that was 1%. I mean, there's no question you went to the 1%, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there questioning my ability to even really truly be vulnerable. I'm holding back the tears. So the irony of all that, I'm hearing your story, I'm feeling your story and wanting to cry, and still finding myself saying, you can't cry.
You're not allowed.
You're not allowed to cry in front of the rest of these people. Right. Especially as someone else's story.
Dad told us not to.
It was like I was watching a movie, right? I'm watching a movie happen in front of me, and I'm sitting there going, don't cry, nope, you can't cry, you can't do this, I'm biting my lip, and I mean, it's just like, it's so ironic because I hate that that behavior has become so innate in me that I can't let go.
Right. Well, it's as you're describing it, I think also at the moment I wasn't so concerned about people judging me, but when it got really raw, all of a sudden I realized I'm in the deep end of the pool. I don't know what the metaphor is, but I was just out there sharing something. But the interesting thing is I never actually really even, it was that memory that I'd pushed down for so long. And now I was 50 years old sharing it for the first time. And as I was going through that, it was sort of a cathartic experience that I was having. Instead of being alone in my room or alone in my office or something, I'm alone with 30, 40 other people sharing that. And so it was a very different experience to actually go through that cathartic thing. And I could, at the same time, I knew it was very cleansing to get that shit out of me, because I remember the only thought I had was, I got to get this shit out of me. Because I'd been stuffing that one memory down for so long. And then I remember I even get choked up thinking about it now, because at the end, he was like, what did you learn, or something about that? Yeah. And it was just a really powerful experience to put that behind me for once and all, because I hadn't really ever wanted to think about it. It was horrible.
See, I think it's more than that too. That's big, and it's enough. And I think it's more than that. And I think one of the things that being vulnerable does, like, why did Vince want you on this podcast? Because he connected with you because of that story. Had you not told that story, you might not have had that connection in the first place. So while it was good for you internally, it was good for the audience and good for the connection and good for the relationship. Yeah. I want to meet that guy. I want to know him. I want to be. And for you, Vince, here's what I'm seeing, because I know you a little bit, and. Well, you said, "Oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not." No, all it did is challenge you. Yeah. All it did is challenge you.
Well, I recognize
and that's good for him that you challenged him.
The power, right? The power of vulnerability, and I think it's something that we miss because we're taught something else, and we don't quite realize the power that has. And beyond just the fact that you shared it, then I watched everybody rally around you. That was the power of that experience share, of you standing up and being okay with being vulnerable to that level, just doing it, right? I mean, you just did it. I don't know if you were okay with it or not. It sounds like maybe you weren't. You're having your own internal conversation around whether that was going to work out for you or not. Yeah. But whatever. At the end, I watched everybody just completely rally around you, and there weren't many dry eyes in the house. So the power was twofold for me in that experience and other experiences of vulnerability. And but that was one of those moments where I really recognized the full power of it. The full power of it is when you are truly vulnerable, there's this authenticity that comes through at a level, you rarely know, and everybody feels it. So the energy that comes from it, everybody in the room felt it. Everybody. And then the other power is it immediately connected you to everybody in the room, and everybody in the room felt connected to you. Right at that moment, done.
So did you know that? Did you know that they connected to you?
At the end.
At the end.
No, during the process, it was such an internal process, and it was like dredging up old things. And I remember I had my head down for some of it because I was choking back the tears. And there was a period where I think I was silent for 10 or 15 seconds as I tried to get the words out, and the knot in my throat was so.
Yeah, I get that.
And then finally at the end, I forget the guy's name, but the moderator or whatever, the guy, he was wonderful. And then literally everybody stood up, and I got these hugs. I think I cried some more, and but it was like, wow, it was a pretty interesting experience for sure. It was a good experience.
It was an incredible moment, no question. I'll share this, if I might, and I want to share a personal experience. I went through Landmark. I did Landmark Worldwide, and I went through the whole curriculum. And I was in the advanced course before I realized what the deep-rooted issue for me was as I was going through that self-development in my life. This is 8 years ago at this point. 7, 8 years ago, I recognized that the moment in which I buried my feelings and made this really silly choice to just move on from it and never speak about it again. You know, as you talked about, you said the words earlier. Those were things in that moment that you hadn't talked about, that you had buried, that
for
you
sure.
you forgot about, right, and now was coming up for you,
and were influencing me without me even knowing about it.
Without you even knowing about it, subconsciously. Yeah, I mean,
100%.
that's the incredible, that's the damage that it does to us internally, right, and mentally and emotionally. My dad passed away at the age of 62. He was very, very young. And he had early onset.
I'm glad you finally said 62 is very young, since I'm only 61. You've been giving me shit about being so old.
No, trust me. You're 61. You're 61 years young, my friend.
There you go.
And my dad. I mean, you know. So imagine next year you not being on this planet anymore. You know, your physical body's gone, and the toll that has on your family and all the people that you've impacted in this world. I mean, that's what my dad leaving this earth, you know, that's the impact that he had at 62 years old, and a devastating disease. I don't wish Alzheimer's and dementia on anybody. And he had early onset. So at the age of 58 is when he was diagnosed, and so it was about a 4-year stint. That being said, no one wanted to read the eulogy, you know, and like I said, I've got 4 other siblings. I'm the youngest of 5. My mom certainly didn't want to do it, and I have no idea, actually, thinking back, why I stepped up to do it. I had a letter, because I was in Italy at the time, and I was in my second tour of playing football in Europe, and I came back a little early. I because all this was happening, and my dad passed away in the hospital 2 hours before my plane landed. So I didn't even get to say goodbye. I didn't really, there was nothing, it was just left open, you know, unfinished. And I had written a letter to him that I had sent prior to me coming out, and it arrived the day after he passed. And so he never got to read this last letter that I wrote to him. So the eulogy, I stood up and read this letter, and I couldn't get, you know, any word out without just, you know, holding back the tears. You could hear it in my voice. You could see it in my body language. You could, you know, all of it. And I remember internally just being so embarrassed by that, that I said, I finished it. I just said, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to finish it. I finished it. And I stepped off the podium, because there's, you know, 200 people here, you know, and I said, I'm never going to feel like that again for the rest of my life. And I took all of that, the grief, the guilt, you know, all these things, like the regret, you know, all of that. And I just said, here you go. I'm going to put it into this nice little ball, and I'm going to bury it as deep as it can go. I'm never going to talk about it again. Never going to worry about it. Not going to think about it. It's gone. And for the next 17 years after that, didn't have a conversation with my mom, didn't have any vulnerable conversation with any of my siblings about it, nothing. So none of us talked about what we had experienced with our father. And I can tell you, since, it has destroyed us as a family unit. Unfortunately, I think we're starting to get a lot of that back. I'm incredibly close with my sister, love her and her husband and her family and all of that, but nothing's the same today. It's not the same, and it's sad.
Vince, help me with the loss of your father, or what?
I don't know. I couldn't pin it on whether it was the loss of my father. I would say, so how it occurs for me is that none of us, because we all grew up in the same way, none of us have been vulnerable enough to tell each other how we really feel about that whole situation.
Even the women.
Yeah, even the women.
And they're normally so much better at this than we are.
I came to terms with it. I finally had a conversation with my mother about it, around it, and how I felt about it, exactly as I just described it. And, my relationship with my mother right now is as good as it's ever been in my entire life. I think as a result of just getting vulnerable with her, telling her how I feel, some of the feelings I had toward her, right? I had a lot of resentment around her, around how she handled it and some other things. And I got through that. I told her about it. I expressed it. I got really vulnerable. And we got through that. And I was really saddened by the fact that I had held all that back for so many years. And it's a destructive path, because you had mentioned it earlier, which is really what triggered me to tell this, is, you hide those things and you bury those things, and it has this impact on you, and you just don't talk about it. Right. And it has this it takes this emotional toll on you. It takes a mental toll on you, and you just go to a dark place. And it's easy to go to a dark place. And I think I went there, in a lot of different ways, and I don't think I was showing up as the person that I'm showing up today. And it's different. And I tell that story in the sense of, if you can take anything away from it, is what we talked about earlier. The power of vulnerability is what you said. It's a release at the same time. I talked about the other powers, connection, which is a really big deal. But release is something else. And how vulnerability can just release these things. So letting it pass through you, and letting it go out, letting it go, right? Just letting it go. And I didn't do that.
So we've talked about some personal stories here, which are really cool. I've got a few of my own that helped me become much more vulnerable, and I think much more attractive. I mean, not physically, but attractive to people. People want to be around because I'm willing to do that. How does it work in the workplace, though? Right? I mean, these are powerful stories of home life, and I get it. But it works at work too. How does it present at work for you? What has vulnerability done for you in your workplace? I know you're the authenticity portion in your organization, and making sure people are, and transparency too, right?
Yeah.
So talk about the benefits of being vulnerable in the workplace. Big, strong CEO type, right? Here we are, all these macho guys. Being vulnerable in the workplace, does it do you any good at work?
Well, I think Empringham has a good story around that, and I think that's a great way to transition into your business and what happened versus where you're at today, and where vulnerability mixes in with that.
Cool. It's funny because I'm still getting my head around it. It's been pretty recent. For me, it's a really good question about vulnerability. People in my circles know that I had this great company, lots of employees, was making great money, and I lost everything. And not only lost everything, but ended up negative in the whole $500,000.
Less than everything.
Less than everything. I mean, I got wiped out. And it was something I was ashamed of, embarrassed of. I mean, I lost my family. I lost my, not half of my kids, my homes, cars, everything, just completely wiped out. And yet, I managed to turn things around in a short period of time. And so, but I was sharing this, and in my workshops, I would talk about the 8 steps to building a social media plan and building a business with social media. Yeah. And in a presentation, I briefly touched on in the very beginning of the presentation, this workshop I was doing, I spoke about it for maybe 2 minutes. Hey, in 2018, I lost it, and I came back with a phone and a lot of hard work in putting this plan together. And I had a friend, Hal Lamb, in Seattle. Yeah. He called me out, and he goes, and I said, hey, how'd you think I did in this workshop? And I got these great grades on the workshop, and I was excited. He said, you made one mistake. And I said, what did I do? And he goes, you talked for like 2 minutes about the most important subject.
Yep.
And I said, what was that? And he goes, you talked for 2 minutes about how you lost everything in 2018. And you came back, and he goes, you were making the point that you're this really smart guy. He goes, you'd be a lot better off if you just were authentic. I don't know if he used the word authentic, but he said, you got to be real. And
Just
I think
a human.
That's the best part of the story, man. That's the best part of the story is actually tell me more about that. He goes, we're all entrepreneurs. We've been there.
Shit happens.
He goes, I would have loved not 2 minutes on that, but like 10 minutes on that and hear more about that. Yeah. And so in some of the other workshops, I started to do that. And actually the new stuff that we're doing, I talk more about that because getting that day in 2018, and I think you got it out of me or you got it out of me, 2018 was a day for me, July 4th, was my life had changed. And it wasn't that I put together a social media plan. It was that over WhatsApp, somebody said, how's your 4th of July going? And I was thinking about ending, everything. I was in a really dark place. Yeah. And I was in my house. They were ready to take my house. The bank had just called and said, you've got 90 days. And I wasn't going to make it. I didn't think I was going to make it. And 4th of July, I get that message. And how's your 4th of July? I was fucking hungover. It's 2:00 in the afternoon, and I'm thinking about eating a bullet. And I had a choice to make at that moment. Either say, I'm fine, right? I'm doing good. I'm doing good, guys. Or just not say anything. And I chose to say, I'm not doing so good. And my phone rang. There was a knock at the door. 30 minutes later, Anthony Gerasi comes over, bangs on the door. We had this great conversation, and that's a whole other conversation. But the point was, I had a decision to make: either do what a lot of men do, or a lot of people do, say nothing.
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'll be fine.
Yeah. I can handle this.
I got it. Or I'm not fine. I don't know how I'm going to handle this, and I'm fucked. In that moment, he reached out, and my life had changed, and I wonder, and that was vulnerability for me. Yeah. Saying I wasn't fine was I don't know, it sounds so stupid, but that was really hard for me to say, I'm not fine, when I got this.
That was your most vulnerable moment, right?
100%.
And there's nothing stupid about it. And I was probably I'm guessing your second or third workshop after that, because you had even mentioned when I was at your workshop, you had mentioned the story about, the feedback that you got from Hal Lamb. And you spent 15 minutes on the story, right? And that was like, you at that point, like, I think if you asked anybody in the room, and I don't know how detailed feedback you got, I think everyone would have said you had me at hello. You know what I mean? Right. And it's because you went the 15 minutes and told the story, and then from there, it's the power of comeback, right? But the vulnerability piece of it was the power. You released it, you let it go. It's become this thing that people can relate to. Why? Reality is this: we've all been in that place. All of us. Whether we got to the extreme that you did or just thought about it, we've all been in that place. And what I've come to understand about vulnerability is even what I described as my moment, we've all been in that place, right? Like, everybody's been there. Everybody's had that moment. And I think it becomes this other piece of the power, which is it's relatable, right? I can relate to you, DeLong.
So what I got out of that is, yes, it takes a ton of courage, especially when we didn't grow up with men. We weren't taught this, right? So it takes a ton of courage to be able to be vulnerable. But what I think the most powerful piece of that is the reaction to the vulnerability that you showed.
Yeah.
Anthony showed up at your door and knocked on the door to take care of you.
Yeah.
People do.
It's a big deal.
I did not expect that.
People do.
It's a big deal.
They don't look down on you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the do's and don'ts. You like the do's and don'ts, man. This one gets me, is because we don't, because we're fearful of what they might think.
Yeah.
And when we do, they think more of us.
This is a tough subject. It's a tough conversation for all of us. And, I learned, I'm referring back to Landmark Worldwide again, and I learned, this distinction between being right and wrong, and this whole overarching judgment scenario, right? And all of us as human beings, we want to be right, all the time if we can, right? So we're just attached to being right. And we're worried about looking good or looking bad. And vulnerability is that piece that if I'm vulnerable, I'm going to look bad. And that's not good. And it doesn't, and I'm not going to be right. And I'm not, you know what I mean? So it's just
this big, strong, powerful guy.
Yeah, it's just like all of it just comes into this one place of, okay, well, great. Then I'm just not going to say anything. I'm just better off not saying anything. I'm better off holding it in and keeping it. You said something in a conversation earlier, which is, hey, everything that happens with the family stays in the family, right? And so then, wow, I gotta go show up somewhere and be fake.
Right.
I have to be inauthentic, is what I have to be. I have to be disgenuine. So I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna put that fake smile on my face, right? We talked about body language in a previous podcast.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden I've got to fake the way that I really feel inside. And I don't know about you guys, it's the thing I hate the most that I no longer do. And I used to do it all the time. And it was great. I'm going to go to this party tonight and I got to show up with a smile on my face and pretend nothing's going on with me. And you know what? I'd rather just not go to that party, right, than have to do that, than to be fake, right? I'd rather call that person up who's hosting the party and say, no disrespect, I love you very much. I can't show up tonight. I'm not in a good place. That's being vulnerable. That's being authentic. But what do? Oh no, I hate the way that he's gonna think of me, and he's gonna hate me for not showing up, and I gotta show up. So meanwhile, I gotta go put a fake smile on my face, and pretend that I like everybody that's there, and pretend that I'm in a good place. Hey, how you doing? I'm great. How are you doing? When in reality, I feel miserable inside. So, I think that's the way that so many people live and so many people can relate to. And I keep using the term let it go. And I'm working on that myself. I'm by no means have I reached any level of perfection around vulnerability, but I'm getting better. And I will tell you the story I told about my father. If you rewind the clock about 7 or 8 years, I couldn't even get those words out. I had never, before 7 or 8 years ago, I had never told that story, period. And now it's taken that long for me to tell that story without stopping it a quarter of the way through, half the way through, or stopping it because I was breaking into tears or, some sort of breakdown from it. And that's okay. Because it takes time. It takes time to heal wounds. It takes time to really let go of these things that drag us down. And I think that's where vulnerability comes in. Scott, you talked earlier, DeLong, you talked earlier about the workplace. And I want to say this, vulnerability has a place for you in all aspects of your life, professionally, personally, whatever that might be, socially, it doesn't matter. I think when you're willing to be vulnerable, it means you're willing to be yourself. It means that you are authentic and you're genuine. And when that shows up for people, they recognize it.
So I love the word willing. And it goes back to most of my work is built on building trust and understanding the concept of trust. And the definition of trust is the willingness to be vulnerable. So willingness was a big deal for me when you said that.
I agree.
I got a little different approach to that party you're talking about when you're not feeling good. And we talked about this when you walked in the room. And one of my responses that when people say, how you doing? Which is a bullshit question, right? Mostly good. And because that's true.
Right.
That's true. Shit happens to all of us. Then there's some bad stuff that's happened today.
Right.
I'm an optimist. I choose to look at the positive side of life, and I want to go and lead in that piece. And if they question, what mostly good? What do you mean? What's not good? You want to know? Let's talk. I'm willing, From about the time I hit 50 on, I'm willing. You want to find out what's not as good? Let's talk about it. I want you to know, because what I want is a connection, human connection.
Yeah.
And it's in the personal life, it's in the neighborhood, it's in business as well.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do that in business as well. Business is mostly good. Well, what do you mean? Well, there's a couple things that could be better. What do you mean? Let's talk about it. And I'll do that. Let's go. Right? Because here's what I want. I want connection. I want connection with you. I want connection with you. I want connection with you. And I'm not going to get that by being, oh, everything's great. Look how cool my watch is. I got a great car out there. That's all bullshit.
It's all bullshit.
That's all bullshit. So
Well, when you're willing to get vulnerable with somebody, then they're willing to get vulnerable with you. I mean, it opens
almost
the door.
always.
It opens the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with social media. I've done consulting with clients. I sat down with one client, and he had an interesting story. Skylar Lewis, and I'll never forget when he was launching Rise Up Kings.
Yeah.
We were sitting in his backyard, and he said, "Listen, I want to talk about porn. I want to talk about issues with my wife. I'm going all in."
Yeah.
And I remember sitting with him, and we had a conversation about it. He said, "If I'm going to connect with who I really want to connect with, it's a no holds barred thing." And I was super impressed, and impressed the wrong word, but it was like
I don't think it is the wrong word. I think it is the right word, because the fear is the opposite. Oh, they're going to judge me. No,
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
impressed with his ability to be vulnerable.
yeah. With inspired too.
Yeah.
That he was willing to take that step. I think that's the other piece of that, where I was like, fuck, the guy's going all in. I said, you really gonna talk about like jerking off to porn and like your issues with porn and the wife, and like you're going all in? And he goes, you know what, I'm not the only fucking one that's had issues with any of those things.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it's a multi-billion dollar industry, and people are having trouble with their wives, people are having trouble with porn, he goes, you think I'm the only one? And I said, fuck, the guy's going all in. This is and I was inspired. And because he was willing to go all in, there was this enormous outpouring of support. Because
You
I
like
think
Skylar better today than you did
100%.
then? Yeah.
100%.
Why not?
100%.
Right? And he's got flaws.
Yeah.
I got flaws.
Yeah.
You got flaws?
I've been in EO forum with Skylar
Yeah.
for 5+ years,
Yeah.
and I will tell you, he is he's a hero of mine for sure.
Likewise.
I look up to him in a big way, and I'll say like you always have people like that in your life that drive you to be something.
Challenge you.
Yeah, challenge
I like
you
that
to
for you.
even
The word
be
challenge.
bigger than you are, and he's one of those. He's one of those
100%.
guys for sure. So, yeah, no, I get you. And knowing Skylar, it's a great story. It's an appropriate story for what we're talking about in this podcast. And he is one of those guys that I look to that is so willing, as DeLong put it, so willing to get vulnerable that you can't help but be vulnerable with him at the same time, right?
Yeah. And there's an aspect of service too, about being serving other people too, that I think he connects with, and it comes through in what he does.
Well, in those men that are driven to be a part of Rise Up Kings are driven because they do relate. You know, I talked about one of the powers of vulnerability is just being relatable, right? You know, and they are relating to that. So everything that you just mentioned that Skylar talked about as he got vulnerable is, he isn't the only one.
Right.
He clearly isn't the only one, and there's a lot of men out there that can relate to that and need that. They need that channel, that avenue to get them to the next level.
And he talks about the power he gains in showing whatever weaknesses that we have as humans, right? And accepting those, learning from those, growing from those. That's powerful.
I wonder also how much like bad shit, like, you know how bad shit grows in the dark? I wonder what there's also a power and vulnerability of taking a light and shining it on it.
Yeah.
And then fucking eviscerating the crap that's growing in the dark. I don't know how to describe it.
It's a great analogy, though.
You know?
It is.
Blows up bacteria. The bacteria of the
But what
secrets.
What does light do? What does the sun do? What is the power of that? It does shine a light on the darkness, and allows that to go away.
This is going to go on way too long. We can keep going. And we could probably do another.
Well, I want to do
session
I
of
want to
this.
do a lightning round. So I agree. So let's get to the finish line here, and I want to do a lightning round. And DeLong, I like doing this, and Empringham, you're gonna play along. All right.
Sounds good.
So it's great. How to be vulnerable. So 3 things that our audience can just take away right now. Like what are the top 3 things to start doing or stop doing? And I'll let you guys choose the other one. What do they need to start doing today or stop doing, or a combination of the two? Top 3, right? Because I got to keep you guys to a short time.
I may go
myself
just with
included. And that's fine. You can 3
Yeah.
or less. But what should they start doing or stop doing so that they can open up, let go, be more vulnerable in their lives?
So here's the thing I learned about vulnerability, and is that it is the most attractive quality I can possess as a human being. Not just as a man, but as a human being. Women know this better than we do. They do. They're better at this. They didn't have the crap, the sports and the dads and all the stuff that we had going on. But what I found is that the more vulnerable I have become in my life, the more attractive, the more I have been able to attract people, employees, friends, all of that. So that's my number one thing, is that it is not the weakness that I was told it was, that it is powerful. It is a powerful tool to use if you want to gain relationships. I'm just going to go with one. That's it.
Like it. Love it.
I got this. The first thing that comes to mind is David Goggins in his book, Can't Hurt Me. I think it's chapter 1. He talks about the accountability mirror. And for me, vulnerability started with me. I had to start being honest with myself and stop fucking lying to myself. It wasn't good enough. My relationships, my body, my spiritual life, my physical health, nothing was where I wanted to be. So I was done fucking lying to myself and saying, I'm doing really good. And so I remember I went and I was like, I read the chapter, the accountability mirror. Look yourself in the eye. Look yourself in the eye, in the mirror, and be fucking honest with yourself. I get choked up thinking, because I remember I like literally, I had my towel wrapped around my waist and I'm looking at myself and I was looking at my life. I was looking at how I was stepping up for my kids or not, how I was stepping up for myself, how I was not, I looked at myself. You're a fucking mess.
It's hard to look in the mirror.
Oh, it was so fucking hard. Yeah. But I had, for the first time ever, Goggins got me to look at myself in the mirror and be honest with myself and stop lying to myself. And it was super painful, but it was also liberating at the same time. I remember I got really emotional. I was like, fuck it. I let it all out. Yeah. So for me, it was starting to actually be honest with myself and not glossing over all the shit that I've been glossing over. And the light, shining a light on it and being okay with it. Like, this is where it really is right now. So fucking step up and change it and stop lying to yourself. So for me, it started with me.
I love that. And, we're all challenged to look in a mirror, right? And nobody wants to be accountable to themselves, right? No. It's easy for me to hold you accountable, but
100%.
You're going to ask me to hold myself. What? Right?
Different ballgame.
Different party. So for me, one is just stop having to be right. I mean, if you just get rid of having to be right all the time, that's liberating, right? And once I committed to that, it was completely liberating. Stop worrying about being judged, and that's easier said than done. Very easier said than done. However, I continue to work on that, and I get better and better at it every time. Stop worrying about being judged. If you can stop being right if you can stop worrying about being judged, then vulnerability becomes really, really simple, right? And start letting go specifically of the things that hold you back. And some of those things you don't even know are there because you've hidden them for so long. Yeah. Like Empringham, you and I, we talked about that. Like we've hidden them for so long.
I'm still hiding mine. That's why I didn't talk about it.
You don't know they're there, right? You don't know they're there, and you might uncover one, and once you've uncovered it, you're like, oh wow, there's a bunch of shit still down there behind the one that I just uncovered, right? Yeah. And so you got to let go of the things that are really, really pulling you back. And one of the best ways to do it is, you can journal, you can write it down. I think it's better to speak it. To speak its name, right? That's my opinion. I think there's a lot of people that are in favor of journaling and writing it down, and I think that is a very healthy way to do that because you are letting it go by putting it on paper. That certainly is a way to do it. For me, what has helped the most is to speak it and to speak it out loud. And the more I talk about it, the more I let it go. And realize it's not going to happen overnight, right? Just to say, oh yeah, I let that go. No, I mean that doesn't work, right? You've got to do the work. You've got to, it's going to take some time. And the more I talk about it, the more I speak it out loud, the more it moves away from me and no longer drags me down. So those are my top things. So I want to say this, and just as we conclude this. This was one of the more powerful podcasts that we've had. I've had all kinds of emotions that have run through me, not in just sharing, but obviously listening to both of you. It's a powerful topic, let alone the power that vulnerability has in and of itself, and the energy that brings about. And it's amazing. And I don't know if that energy comes through. I'm going to say that it probably will as this podcast gets released. And I'm thankful for that. So Empringham, I'm thankful for you coming on today. Incredibly insightful conversation. DeLong, thank you for your vulnerability, your body language, and some of the way that you reacted. I could tell in your voice, your tone, and some other things that this had an equal effect and impact on you. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this to go out. Now I'm gonna say this.
This one made me happy. I love our topics. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't.
Yeah.
This one made me happy.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to close with this because I think sobriety is a part of vulnerability, right? And recognizing, you had mentioned, I think it was just a quick mention of the alcoholism that you dealt with your father, and I think sobriety in yourself. And I think, you mentioned the dark place that you went to, which alcohol was involved at that point, while Scott and I have enjoyed one of our most favorite IPAs.
Almost everybody's favorite IPA.
Which is Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewing, which we've had on a previous podcast. So this is nice. This is our first repeat IPA, nice. By the way. Nice. So I couldn't help it. But you're not partaking with us, and I want to recognize the sobriety that you have, and I don't know if there's a mention that you want from that.
Personal choice, no real mention. You mentioned the start and stop. During the accountability mirror, I made some choices about things that I would start and whether I would stop, and literally it was on the stop list. Cross off the fucking list, and literally for me, it was a major crutch, and as I mentioned, it goes back generations for me. So it was a personal choice. I said, you know what, I could be a world-class alcoholic, and I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so for me, once I got it out of my life just improved, and so that's where it is.
Now, I know many people that can relate to that.
Yeah.
DeLong, you want the last word?
No, yeah. This is kind of the way I roll. But listen, this is one of my 3 top topics when I talk about life-changing things that happened in me. 2 of which I've done pretty well with. The third one I'm still working on. Vulnerability, empathy, and the last one that I'm still working on is humility. I think if we master those things, we got it made. That's what I think. And so I'd like to do this on the humility piece sometime soon, because there's still a lot I need to learn on that. But this is a big one. This vulnerability is a big one.
I agree. I would say
at home and at work.
No doubt.
It works in both places.
I would say you're right. Does that make you feel good to be right?
Listen, I don't always have to be right anymore. But in this case, I am.
Well, listen, check us out at theceopodcast.net. Also, look for us on YouTube. So if you go on YouTube, just search for our YouTube channel, put in The CEO Podcast, and that way you get to watch us and listen to us at the same time if you prefer. And Empringham, you got some things that you want to plug to for your own business, or maybe a website or anything that you want any of our listeners to check out.
If you're interested in a workshop and you are interested in growing your business with social media, and you are interested in looking at the 8-step blueprint that we put together, you can go to scottempringham.com. You'll see all kinds of resources and tools. There's some free stuff available for everybody, and they can also sign up for a workshop there.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
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 Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. To learn more about Scott and Vince, please visit theceopodcast.net and check out the calendar to tune in for our next episode. While on this site, you can also listen to past episodes, access additional content created for our listeners, and if you would like to dive deeper into any topic, there is an option to schedule some time with Scott or Vince. Thanks for listening.